Hello and welcome to Disaster Zone, a show about emergencies and disasters that can happen anywhere and anytime. King County Airport, or Boeing Field, is one of our busiest non-commercial airports in the nation. It's a hub of activity for UPS, flight schools, and private aircraft. It also has a very specialized team devoted to keeping it safe, and we're going to talk about that later in the show. And my guest today is Charity Catalfamo, who is the Safety and Security Program Manager at the airport, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from you today, there, Charity. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm just thinking about the pilots. When they're filing their flight plans, do they say the official flight plan? Are they flying into Boeing Field, or are they flying into King County International Airport?
You know, I've had the opportunity to fly being a pilot into Boeing Field, and I think it's affectionately known amongst the pilot community as Boeing Field. So when you file a flight plan, you file it as K, which is the designator for airports in the contiguous U.S., and then BFI for Boeing Field.
What is the history of the King County Airport? And certainly there's this relationship with Boeing Field also.
So the airport has been operated by King County since 1928, and it is referred to as Boeing Field based on Boeing being a very large tenant at the airport and obviously a big manufacturer in our region. And so people often refer to it as Boeing Field, even though the official name is King County International Airport.
Okay. And do you guys ever use it interchangeably yourselves, running King County International Airport?
We do. You know, I think that certain groups at the airport, especially my group in the operations department, tend to call it Boeing Field because we often think about it from the pilot perspective, and we work pretty closely with the pilots. But I think the county certainly appreciates when we recognize it as King County International Airport.
Okay. It's not a commercial airport, so there's no commercial airlines coming in. Certainly, I know Paint Field is getting set. It is a commercial place, but actually have commercial flights and that. But so how does King County function? So what happens there? What are the activities? If it's not commercial flights, what does happen there?
So King County International Airport has over 150 businesses, and I think one of the great things about this airport is that there's no typical day. We have a really dynamic mix of users and tenants, and that ranges from cargo, as you mentioned. We have cargo and corporate aircraft flying in daily, light general aviation, so those are the folks who are learning to fly, and those are the folks who own aircraft and park them at our airport. We also have unscheduled charter flights, so those are our sports teams. And then also, obviously, a big part of it is the aircraft manufacturing that comes and goes from the airport, and that includes military and also commercial flights. And they make up a big part of our airport users. And additionally, we have military aircraft that fly in and out. We're home to the Blue Angels for Seafair every year. And so I would say that no day is the same, and we have a really great mix of traffic.
Are all those businesses do they all have an aviation component to it, or perhaps there might be a few that are not?
So there's an aviation component to every business on our airport, and I think one of the things for us as airport operators is that it's different from a commercial service airport where you're dealing with transporting a large amount of people through your terminal every day. For us, we're transporting cargo, we're supporting manufacturing, we're supporting folks who are learning to fly, and so there's an aviation component to everything that happens there.
But how long is the airfield? Is it, I don't know, compared to a typical commercial airport type of thing?
So I think airports come in all shapes and sizes, and some are certainly have a little bit more land to work with than others, but we're just short of 600 acres. Our main runway is 10,000 feet, and we don't have a whole lot of room on either side of that. We're bordered by neighborhoods and industrial activity, and so we're fairly limited to the space that we have to work with.
Okay, and way back in time, this is like 1996 up until about 2003, King County Emergency Management, we were in the 7300 building at the airport. So we were very used to it. When the Nisqually earthquake happened, we were actually down in those facilities there. And you talked about planes coming in and out. I know the president, whenever they are in town, they fly in also to King County International Airport.
Yes.
Is there any special security precautions that you guys take when that might, I don't know how long it's been since we have had a president come in, but are there special security pieces you're responsible for? Because I know there's a whole team that comes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work really closely with the federal agencies, including the Secret Service, when we have any sort of VIP visit. And we have special protocol that we follow at the airport. And actually our tenants are a big part of that, because oftentimes we have to have ramp freezes, and oftentimes the Secret Service may have a particular way that they want the airport to function during the times when the aircraft is landing and taking off. So we work really closely with them. And located where we are, we've gotten pretty used to having VIP visits. We're really close to downtown Seattle, and so it's oftentimes preferred, just so folks can get in and out quickly. And so we've gotten fairly accustomed to it, although we never relax and one visit's never like the other, but that's something that we routinely do.
So is there any, we talk about not being a commercial airport, but I remember back in the day there were helicopter flights that were commercial in nature. Is there any of that going on at the airport today? They kind of come and go sometimes.
So we have small scheduled service, and that's Kenmore Air, and they fly in and out of the San Juan Islands and parts of Canada. And also then our unscheduled charter flights that are sports teams or
Somebody owns their private airplane.
Right, so under certain circumstances, we do operate very similar to a commercial service airport. And actually, we're regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration in the same capacity that a large commercial service airport would be. So we follow the same FAA regulations as at Seattle-Tacoma.
So it's interesting, driving on I-5, you'll see planes coming in, and they're not going into King County Airport, but you can see them, they're on their approach into SeaTac. Is there pretty strict guidelines about aircraft separation there, you know?
Yes, absolutely. So I think our control tower at Boeing Field has a really challenging job. As you said, the traffic for either departure or arrival, depending on which way the winds are blowing, is right over our airport, and they're only separated by a class of airspace. So 1,000 feet overhead, SeaTac is going for their landing. And so our tower, on a day where they're able to see it, are visually separating those traffic from one another. And when we have low visibility at either our airport or SeaTac, it significantly affects how we're able to receive aircraft because of our proximity to them.
And that, does it mean it slows it down, or you have more space between aircraft required, or?
It can slow it down, and we're fortunate that we have a really strong working relationship with Seattle-Tacoma and their tower, and so they coordinate really closely to keep traffic coming and going from both airports. But just based off of the location, sometimes when the visibility is low, it can slow down aircraft traffic.
And I would think is that a physical hotline? Probably you're not depending on radio only.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, you pick it up and it rings.
Absolutely. So the tower has a direct line to the Seattle tower, and they speak many, many times, I'm sure, throughout the day.
Okay. Well, we've talked about how every airport is similar. They're all operating with FAA guidelines. That's the staff part of it. But what about what other similarities are there? And you know, how is King County Airport different than a lot of other airports? There's a phrase in the maritime industry that when you've seen one port, you've seen one port, and I'll just whether that applies to airports also.
Yes, and actually I thought that was an aviation phrase because I've heard that several times. Certainly airports have a lot of similarities, and for us, our main function is to protect our runway, make sure it's safe, and make sure our operations are efficient and that we're moving traffic. And so I think that every airport can safely say that that's their main mission. Outside of that, our mix of tenants make us a lot different than a commercial service airport, because you may have a very large aircraft routinely followed by a very small aircraft right behind it, and that affects things such as spacing. And It affects their ability to get on and off the runway very quickly, and also we're not routinely moving aircraft full of passengers. And so for us, our business model looks a little bit different than a commercial service airport, but we do have a really dynamic mix that requires us to work really closely with the tenants to make sure that we're meeting their business needs as well.
The Boeing plant in Renton, there's another airport there. How does that compare? Because they're flying planes out of there. Sometimes I think they come over to Boeing Field, King County Airport on that. So how's that compare? I think of those as SeaTac. I don't know, what's the name of the field for where they fly out of Renton?
I think we just call that, we call it referred to as the Renton Airport.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how's that compared to you or a commercial airport?
So we work really closely with Renton. They're very similar to us in the fact that there is, the Boeing company is their largest tenant there. Yeah. So the aircraft are built in Renton and they're flown over to Boeing Field where the flight testing is complete and then they're delivered to the airline. So we work really closely with them. We have a bit more traffic than they do. They have a lot of general aviation as we do, but we have the large cargo carriers and also quite a bit of corporate. So we're somewhere in between Renton and SeaTac.
Okay, all right. And those are the 3 larger airports here in this immediate vicinity?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So do they still have a National Guard communications mission or detachment on the north end of the airport? I remember that being there.
Yes, so the National Guard still does have a facility over there, and they're landside, so we don't operate or we don't coordinate with them too much, but they do still have a facility.
Okay, so you really do have a pretty expansive mission, and I know, I had no idea that even it was a King County facility until I started working for King County, so I'm sure a lot of people are having their eyes opened to the fact that this is a public airport in part of King County government.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are unaware of the fact that the county owns and operates an airport and what an important economic driver it is for this region and how much is actually going on. We have about 170,000 operations a year, which rivals the amount of traffic that SeaTac gets.
Right. So that is a lot.
Yeah.
And how many staff are at the airport? King County employees, I guess, that use that term.
Yes, so we have approximately 50 King County employees, and then we have 18 fire and law enforcement deputies from the sheriff's office housed at the airport as well.
Okay. And on the second half of the show, we're going to be talking more specifically about that specialized force, about your disaster role that you could play. This is Disaster Zone.
Yeah.
But first, we're going to take a break, and for you folks at home, please watch this message, and we'll be right back and talk more about the King County International Airport.
Sometimes you need information fast. Alert King County is a wireless warning system that can help you make good decisions in an emergency.
Technology has provided emergency managers with incredible advantages, even from 5 years ago. We can send messages out by text or email or voice.
You can opt into the system for free.
Supply us with information about who you are, where you live, what your preferred methods of communications are, so that we can securely send out information to you. If you were driving through a neighborhood that had a flood warning, you would get a personalized text or email to your smartphone.
Most county alerts are sent to residents in smaller, targeted impact areas.
When Northeast 124th slid up in Duval, we used the system to alert the people behind the slide area.
In more widespread emergencies, the iPause network can reach all cell phones.
And we reserve iPause notifications for life safety for large areas.
If you're concerned about false alarms, you'll be glad to know that strict protocols are followed.
Before I've even entered it into the system, I'm getting permission from the emergency management director or deputy director, following our standard operating guidelines.
But even with alerts, the best advice?
Have a plan, build a kit, get involved.
Sign up for alerts at kingcounty.gov/alert King County.
Hi, and this is Disaster Zone. If you're just joining us, today's show is all about the King County International Airport, sometimes called Boeing Field. And Charity Catalfamo is the Safety and Security Program Manager at the airport. And let's dive into something you're very familiar with, because this is what you do day to day, the safety and security. So what are some of the emergency response capabilities at the airport?
So our airport, we're situated in a fairly unique situation. We're near downtown Seattle, and we're also really close to SeaTac Airport. And so for us, our main focus, though, is always protecting aircraft. And so we have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have fire and law enforcement protection at the airport, and we also have airport operations and airport maintenance who are designated as essential personnel. So whether that's a natural disaster or a weather event or an aircraft accident, personnel at the airport are prepared to respond and to stay until the job is done. And so that's what makes us operate, and that's what makes us well prepared. So we work really closely with the FAA to make sure that we have plans in place for those things that airports experience on a regular basis, and also those things that you hope you don't experience, but they do have a big impact when you experience them.
Okay, and the commercial airport like SeaTac, and I want to say it's a triennial exercise. They have to do a simulating crash, that type. Do you have any requirements like that?
So as we're designated as a Class 4 airport by the Federal Aviation Administration, which means that we are not officially required to do a triennial exercise every 3 years, but we still choose to do that. It's very important for us. Our airport is geographically located in 2 separate cities, so it's divided part ways down, so partly in Tukwila, partly in the city of Seattle. It's King County's jurisdiction, but then we also have the advantage of having the Boeing company, they're manufacturing on our airport, and so they also have a fire department there. So we have a lot of resources in a small area, but part of the response is to make sure that those resources are coordinated. So we conduct several tabletop exercises a year with our mutual aid partners, and then we also do conduct full-scale mass casualty drills.
Okay. And explain what a tabletop exercise is. A lot of people wouldn't know what that means.
So a tabletop exercise is when we gather around the table and we work through a particular scenario. So what we try to do is we try to solve an issue or resolve something that could use a little bit of polishing. And so oftentimes we're talking about communication with multiple agencies during a response, or talking about things. They can be small, seemingly small, such as where do you come in when we call you for help, or how do you get a hold of us and let us know where you are. And so working through those in a kind of a round table, non-stressful type environment really allows us to make sure our plans are current and to make sure that everybody understands the plan.
Yeah. And all that is critically important. I don't know if you remember that this is kind of ancient, but there was the, I want to say a DC-10 that lost all controls and landed at an Iowa airfield there. Pretty much everybody survived out of this really a catastrophic accident, but they got it on the ground. But they were drilling that day for that type of, they were just doing their due diligence for that, and they had all those resources there. I don't know if you've ever studied that at all.
I have, and I think I had a bit of a similar experience when I first started at Boeing Field. We held the first tabletop exercise of my time there, and this was 7 years ago. And we actually had an aircraft accident that same evening. And it was very similar to what we had done in our tabletop drill. And it being so close to when we had practiced allowed us to take a really close look at what we said we were going to do and to polish up what we actually did in real life. So I think if you take advantage of those times when things do go bad and pull out your plans and make sure, because you're going to have the first several steps are going to be the same no matter what happens. And so we try to constantly look at our plans and make sure that they're organic.
Okay. I've got this lingering question I keep thinking about is, do you have snowplows?
We do. We have 4 snowplows at the airport. We have a broom and a blower, and we are really prepared to respond to a snow event. Even though we don't get snow that often, we practice. We take the snow removal equipment out on the runway when there is no snow, and we get some funny looks from our tenants, but that's because we don't get snow that often, so when we do, we want to be comfortable with getting out there and with practicing our formations.
All right. Well, look at December 26, 1997. It's the day after Christmas, and we got a lot of snow
Absolutely.
that time. So
There's the potential for it, for sure.
So let's talk about that security staff and the fire response personnel, that they're dual-headed. Now, this does exist some other places, but it's pretty unique here. Explain what it means for the police and fire to be one single force.
So it is a unique situation, and there are other airports in the country that share the model, but we're definitely not the majority. So we have the King County Sheriff's Office providing us law enforcement and also aircraft rescue and firefighting at the airport. And so they come into the unit as an assignment, much like any other unit, and we send them off for training to learn how to drive the fire trucks and how to respond. They also are trained as EMTs, and then we also train them to do airport operations. So they come in and have to do a lot of training, and they're really valuable to us because they're there 24 hours a day. And for the tenants, they're used to seeing them drive around. They know what their trucks look like, and they know when they call the phone number that they're going to be there very quickly. And so for us, that's very important that our tenants know who's responding and how to get a hold of them.
How long is that, somebody rotates in, rotates out, how long would that typically be? I mean, years?
We hope to keep personnel as long as possible because it's a big training commitment to get up and running, because it's a whole different vocabulary. You're talking to the control tower. We have a different phonetic alphabet than the police do, and so they actually have to really adjust the way that they're used to doing things, and it takes a little while to get comfortable with. But we like to get folks from the sheriff's office in that really appreciate the environment, and we have a lot of people who are maybe ex-military or who've worked on airplanes in the past, and they really enjoy the environment, and so they stick around. And for us, that's really important because it's a unique environment.
Okay. And the phonetic alphabet, Tao's in the Army. We use Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and you're saying it may be different for.
Absolutely.
And is that a airfield or is it FAA lingo mandated?
So the law enforcement community uses a different phonetic alphabet than the one you just spoke about. So yes, that's their typical aviation phonetic alphabet. And so when the sheriff's office comes in, depending on which radio they're talking on, they may be using a different phonetic alphabet. So I think it requires them to be really flexible. And to be able to change depending on what role they're playing.
Okay. And how many, I call them foam trucks, how many foam trucks do you have? The bigger ones that stand off and really try and put the fire out quickly on an airplane.
Yeah, so we have 2 fire trucks at the airport, and one has a 3,000-gallon capacity and the other has a 1,500-gallon capacity. And we actually staff above what the FAA requires us to, just based on the types of businesses and aircraft operations that we have at the airport. And then also the Boeing company, they have trucks specifically for aircraft rescue and firefighting as well there on the field. So if we need assistance, we can request that from them, and they're really close for us.
What are some of the vulnerabilities at the airport, where you're located?
So we're in a unique situation because we're bordered by the Duwamish and also the interstate and a rail line. We had an earthquake several years ago, and due to our proximity with the river there, we have to watch that for liquefaction. And so that's a challenge for us. And also just being so close to urban areas, we have to watch out for hazardous materials being transported past our airport. And we also have a lot of hazardous materials stored at our airport in the form of jet fuel. And so the location requires us to constantly work with our community partners to make sure that our plans are coordinated in case something happens even off the airfield, that our plans work closely with theirs, and that we communicate closely, and we know what to expect in an emergency.
Okay. Anything about I used to say about the when the 7300 building was a county building, but we talked about being in an area with liquefaction. There used to be a stream that went through where the airport is. You have the railroad right there, kind of in a communications hole because you got the bluff above, and so there are challenges there. But you're kind of right there in the middle of everything. How much additional space would you have there to support, disaster response?
So we regularly communicate with the public health agencies, and we have some memorandums of understanding in place that, barring us being part of the actual emergency,
Right.
that we may be able to support being a point of distribution in an emergency, or we may be able to, even if we were to suffer an earthquake and have some sort of structural damage at the airport, we're still a large open space that we may be able to support helicopter operations or transportation while we get back up and running as an airport. So that's part of our regular planning, and we want to serve the community that we're in by being able to utilize the airport as best we can.
Yeah, the proximity to downtown is great. I'm trying to remember if it's 8-10 miles. I used to know that off the top
Yeah,
of my head.
we're less than 5 miles from downtown Seattle, so we're really close. We're in a great location.
Okay. If I want to talk about the NDMS, just explain that quickly, how you support that and what that is.
So the NDMS is the National Disaster Medical System, and Boeing Field is undergoing an exercise this year to revalidate us as a patient reception area. And so if there's an emergency outside of our region and we need to fly patients, say there's an earthquake in Alaska, then the military would fly folks who were in hospital facilities or needed assistance outside of that area into areas like Seattle. And so we need a reception point. So the airport is going to revalidate our plan to be a reception point, so aircraft would land there, and then they would be taken into the local medical system from our airport.
Yeah. Well, this has just been terrific, Charity. Most people, there's the airport, they don't know about all the things that you're doing, the training that's going on, specialized equipment you have, how you fit into a larger disaster system. So it's just great to hear all the activities you have going on there. And so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For that. As a token, you get to take your coffee mug with you, and hopefully it will keep all disasters at bay, and hopefully your desk doesn't look like a disaster.
Thank you.
And that. So thanks again for being on the show,
Thank
and
you.
we wish you all the best in the world.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And this brings us, folks, to the end of our show for today. Thanks for tuning in and learning more about what you and others can do, and you've been finding out what the King County International Airport is doing to become better prepared for disasters. Remember, if you personally are going to get prepared, today is a good day to start, and why not now? Thanks much, and tune in again soon.